Hello there, friend. Welcome back to the Construction Leadership Podcast. I am your host, Bradley Hartmann. I'm excited to bring to you today my conversation with Mr. Adam Kouri. He is building great things at DPR Construction. He's a project executive based in Charlotte. Now, here's my commitment to you. If you listen to this episode, there's going to be two main things that I believe can certainly change your life right here today, because in talking to Adam, both of them have changed my outlook and have me thinking about things differently, and maybe more importantly, starting to behave differently. The first one is this idea of shadow behaviors. Adam gives more context in this episode about the dark side of our leadership and our personality. And if the number one rule in leadership is know thyself and lead yourself intelligently, thinking about how we act as leaders in our worst, when there is stress, when there is pressure, is incredibly important. And the second one is this idea of team health. Relatively simple idea, but the more you listen to Adam about how they invest to develop high performance teams, and that's a big part of the reputation of DPR. We have known people and worked with different divisions of DPR all over the country. Part of what they do is have people who love working there and build great things. So this idea of team health is something that you can act upon immediately. So who is Adam Kouri? He began his career at A&P, Adolphson and Peterson. He worked at Russell and Barton Mallow, and he's been with DPR for the last 7 years. In addition to shadow behaviors and team health, we talk about prefabrication in construction in general and in the healthcare space specifically. We talk about artificial intelligence because, yes, it's everywhere, how they think about it and how they invest in it. And we talk about the importance of understanding what type of learner you are. We're going to cover all of this and more. Please enjoy my conversation with Mr. Adam Kouri at DPR. As always, thank you for listening. Mr. Adam Kouri, welcome to the show. If you're open to it, I think we're going to come in hot. Are you open to coming in hot, Adam?
I'm absolutely open to it. I'm excited.
Okay. Favorite leadership movie, and of course, be prepared to defend it.
Okay. I'm a big sports guy. I'm a big baseball guy.
Okay.
And I really like Moneyball. I like Moneyball for a couple of reasons. Number one, it's really relatable to people and to business. The general manager, Billy Beane, he's being challenged to win. He's lost some key players and he's constrained by money, which is relatable. And he's being challenged to do more with less. And so he had to deal with a lot of naysayers, which I think is a huge leadership trait, right? If you've got a big idea, you're going to need to pull people on board early. And he didn't have any on board. And then he found his cohort, who was his data guy. And I'll say it again, I love the data behind it, right? It was a disruptor for baseball. Data can be a disruptor for all industries, especially construction. And then when they hit the ground, it didn't really work out. If you remember, they lost a bunch of games. They had a terrible kickoff. It was the 2002 season. And then they ended up winning 20 games in a row in 2002, which is the record. And he won. And then it became the standard. It's just like a lot of things within the industry, right? A couple people break through the wall. It's actually my favorite quote, right? The first break through the wall, get the bloodiest. That's in that movie. That's the first time I've heard it. And yeah, and it was hard for him to do it, but they nailed it. If you've seen the movie, he turned down a job in Boston and he remained in Oakland. But I love that movie for a lot of reasons. Just going against the grain, finding your team, developing your mission, and then living off of that.
This is a great jumping off point. I was planning on asking this later. There's that classic scene, and actually there's multiple of them. There's two different scenes where it's Billy Beane meeting with the scouts, and he's just like, you're just talking, like this is the same old thing. As you guys, part of DPR, right, is one of your core values is being unique. Something that you're passionate about that we talked about, we'll dig into more, is AI in the construction industry, in healthcare specifically. How do you approach those meetings when you do have a bunch of talent and experience and wisdom in the room of older people that do, in some sense, represent a legacy of where the industry's been, and they might be resistant to moving forward?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think you got to either manage it with data but with where you see the industry going. And you can talk about it in a lot of aspects of it. So I'm old enough to remember, I know when I nerd out on construction, we used to do overhead coordination on a table, a backlit table, or then you switch to BIM modeling, and some people can get behind that. And then now we're switching to fabricating from our BIM model, which is lending itself to prefabrication. And I think the underlying rule of everything is change is constant. And you're either going to be on board, you're going to be ahead of it. And if you're behind it, you may cease to exist. And it's a hard conversation to have, I'll admit it, but there's the safety cliche that just because you did it in the past doesn't make it right. But that can be said for construction as well. We're manufacturing airplane tolerances. It's making things go together quicker. 30 years ago, prefabrication probably wouldn't have worked out. We couldn't get it that close. Now we can, and we need to capitalize on that and use it and create efficiencies.
Yeah, I had a client once tell me, as we were talking about this change in the culture that they were committed to and really investing in technology and moving the whole organization forward. And I said, you got a lot of really talented, smart leaders who've been around that seem really resistant to this. And he said, I know. And he said, sometimes culture changes mainly by two things, retirements and deaths. And that was like a real wake-up call to me. But what he was saying also was like, you don't have to be here. And while that might seem callous, and especially in a job where we need all talented people, you're at 900 people going to 1,200. At a certain point, especially in leadership, if we don't have people who believe in the direction we're going, who are all rowing in the same direction, it's really hard to get there. Adam, let's sit on prefab. This is something that I was really fascinated to learn more about. This seems like an inflection point on something that has been going on in various states for obviously several decades. Maybe just give me and our audience a little context about what you're seeing in prefabrication and technology that's really moving you guys forward in the healthcare space.
Yeah, prefabrication has been driven by a couple of things within the industry. I think we're talking about the technology to do it. I think we're also talking about the fact that labor is hard to come by at construction sites. And it's supplemented specifically in the healthcare industry by the desire for clinical standardization or enterprise standardization, which means nothing more than healthcare operators want a room at one campus to be the same as the room in the other. And if a clinician walks into a space, they want to know what drawer the PPE is, how to operate, how to be efficient. And so as healthcare systems are going down that, it makes repeatable modules. And it started from couple projects, we've done prefabricated head walls. And that was a conversation I was part of where we really lean in and standardize. And do you really need 32 different head walls for 32 different spaces, or can you do 16, which creates efficiency on the manufacturing side? We do MEP racks, we do exterior skin. And what it does, it creates increased quality. It gets people off the site. We manufacture bathroom pods in Florida and Arizona for a project in Charlotte. We manufacture our exterior skin in Pennsylvania. So if we've got a labor resource problem in North Carolina, we can remedy that. And those are just small pieces. I think, like you said, the modules are going to get bigger and bigger. We're talking about freestanding EDs, where you bring module sections together, you stitch them on site. And I think it's going to go a lot bigger than that. 3D printing isn't there yet, but I'm confident it will be there. I've heard you can order an operating room on Amazon. I haven't searched. I believe it comes from Sweden. But I mean, there's things that are just coming out, and people who are embracing it are going to be ahead of the curve. There's a saying I have, it's perfection is the enemy of progress, meaning if you wait for that right time to jump in, you're probably going to be late. And I think construction needs to embrace that. And we need to embrace it with our clients, knowing the first time we do it, if we embrace it, they may not be perfect right then, but it'll definitely add value down the road, especially as we standardize some of these service lines within the healthcare industry.
Was there an inflection point in your career, your involvement with DPR? Because I'm trying to think through is for a lot of folks who are listening, they're probably nodding along and saying, yeah, we're not where Adam is, but we know it's there. I don't know how we get from here to there. So I'm curious if there's any story or an example that you can give that helped turn that corner for you.
So I'll tell two really brief stories. So when we started this atrium project, it's a huge project. It started in 2019. We built one building, and then we're working on a larger building. We built a rehabilitation hospital that was 154,000 square feet. And now we're building the bed tower, which is just over $1 million. And we were convincing our client that prefab was the way to go. And we're giving them the benefits, and they were skeptical, but we convinced them to manufacture some big components. And we're no longer there with them. They're all on board with prefab. And ironically, I was talking to another client building another mega project, and they're talking about prefab. And I mean, from a current standpoint with me, the conversation I had was like, prefab is no longer a question, right? It's a means and methods. We're confident in it. We know it's going to deliver the project. So we just need to embrace what it is. And I think, there's two types of prefab that I use. There's a big prefab that you need to get your design and your owner input in. And then there's what we call trade-specific prefab. Now, trade partners, they're prefabricating components at their sites that we don't even know about. You walk around a construction project and you'll see bundles of materials with QR codes that isn't necessarily big and sexy and doesn't have that sell value, but they're still capitalizing on their capabilities to create efficiencies on their own. Prefab is going to continue to grow. I think if you're a contractor and you're not doing it, you should really leap on that trend because it's only going to continue.
Where does AI tie into this conversation with prefab, if at all?
I think AI will tie into the conversation because you can program AI to do a lot of things. I think AI is really influencing healthcare delivery. AI has been around for a long time. I know it's a big word. AI has been involved in billings and dictation. I think we're getting to see AI in terms of diagnostics. And the way we look at AI is the way care is delivered is the way that we're going to deliver spaces. And I think that's going to change. And believe it or not, as a person who likes to understand the healthcare industry, we're getting to a point where our population is getting older and then younger people are having less kids, which means there's going to be an aged population. And I think part of that is going to drive the efficiency for AI in the healthcare environment in terms of diagnostics. And there's a term that we use. When I got my MBA, I took a couple masters of healthcare classes as my electives. We just talked about operating at the top of licenses, which meaning if you're a clinician and you're dictating, you're probably not making the best use of your time. And as we keep people doing what they're doing at the top of their license, and I say that circling back to construction, there may be less space for administrative spaces. The hospital back in the 50s, which I've never been in, is certainly different than the way it is today. They're nice rooms, right? They want people to enjoy it. They understand the value of sunlight, not just the change that we're talking about previously, but as AI comes in, rooms may change, infrastructure is going to change. There may be less spaces for offices and more spaces for clinicians. And there may be AI-equipped diagnostics in rooms, in procedural rooms. And our goal is to be ahead of that, be equipped to prepare those spaces so clinicians can deliver care efficiently.
Yeah, I have a book here. I'll be annoying and grab it. I have a fascination with containers, container ships, the standardization of containers. And I was at a bookstore and they had this book. It's literally called Standards. It's from MIT. On it are some containers being in place. And I'm fascinated to understand the history on why, whatever the dimension is for railroads, how did that become standardized? Maybe we'll make a small pivot here, Adam. As you think about your team and your leadership capabilities for your direct team at DPR, let alone 1,000+ people on a job site, working together, working cohesively, trying to enjoy the amazing things you're building, how do you think about standardizing all the elements of leadership so people know when you show up on a job here that we're running, this is the standards that we expect in terms of behavior and communication. How do you think about that at the scale that you're operating with?
I would love to have it standardized from project to project. I know as we go to a project, we do try to create those standards. And this project that I'm on right now is unique. And I think, we talk about team health on our project quite a bit and team health assessments. So team health is just the ability for a team to work together efficiently. It's really a high-performing team. And the high-performing team might be different from project to project. So we took a lot of time in the beginning of this project to create what we call our company charter, which is just how is this team going to operate? And I actually grabbed it, and it's nothing more than we're going to respect each other. We're going to listen to each other. We're going to rank in the room is a DPR standard, and that's the way we operate within our project. And it sort of fosters lean leadership as well as just how we're going to operate in terms of we need to listen to the folks that are putting the work in place and give them a space where they can both be efficient and be happy with what they do. And we evaluate ourselves through our team health assessments. If we have a low scoring on any one of those aspects, we really dig into it. We understand why, but it's constant maintenance. It is a lot of work, but I think it adds value and it creates a good culture within the job that anybody can talk to anybody about any problem. And it leads us to problem solving and it leads to really good candid conversations. And all those are a byproduct of just people being comfortable walking into the room, bringing up a problem that we all need to solve.
If you would, maybe go back to the beginning of this project when you said we invested a lot of time. what I've noticed, not only with our small team and with our clients who have significantly larger teams, part of what I think inhibits or prohibits this team health idea is really just the schedule, which is, are we allocating enough time to give us time where we're not running around doing other things so we can be together to develop that cohesiveness from a high level? Maybe just give us a little context on how you plan that.
Yeah, we went away for multiple 2-day retreats, and we talked about what's important to the stakeholders, from our client, Advocate Health, our architects and engineers, the DPR Rogers team, the DPR team, what's important to making a project great. And we literally whiteboarded all over the room. We found some commonalities. We created the charter, which I say we created the charter. It wasn't without a lot of debate. And then we took some time to learn about ourselves. We took some other individual assessments. We talked about what those assessments mean to us. It helped us understand how people communicate, when people work, how they talk to each other. It's really interesting to hear that. And I say that, I'll tell a little story about myself, is I'm a verbal learner. I hear things and they make a lot more sense to me when I read them, and people who work with me know them. And so my advice to somebody who's with me is, I know email needs to be sent, but if you're sending me an email, save yourself 10 minutes on the email and give me a 2-minute conversation. And that'll save us all a lot of time, because I am that guy who will call you when you send an email and just say, yeah, I'm going to need to talk about this before I even read it. It's just the way I am. And understanding that about other people helps everybody be efficient and really lead.
Tell me a little bit about the charter. Are there constraints on this? Is it one page? I'm picturing it like a real kind of fancy one-pager, or it might look like the U.S. Constitution. I can't really tell in my mind.
You want to see it? Can I flash it?
Yeah, please.
I'll just read the first 3. Respect. We listen, ask questions, make sure we understand and respect each other's perspectives, right? If a team, and that's a really good one. You could almost end it there with most teams. Reliability. We're going to be reliable. We're going to say what we're going to do and do it when we say we're going to do it. And then integrity. We do the right thing even when no one is watching. That's the first 3, but there's a couple like that. So then as we do our team health assessment, we turn those statements into questions. Are we listening and being respectful? Are we reliable to our commitments? Are we operating with integrity? And then we score those and we give attention to what needs work. And I'll tell you, we have decisions. Decisions is one. We're going to make quality decisions fast enough to meet the needs of the project. We got some feedback from the project through our team health assessment that we were making slow and not very good decisions. It was one of the lowest scoring on our project for probably a couple months at a time. We were trying to understand it. And at one of our meetings, we just printed off a decision log and we posted on the wall and we said, y'all, if you need something from us, come write it down and we're going to take care of it right away. And that kind of changed the decision-making. It just showed that we were reacting. And ironically, we still don't understand why the decision-making was so poor, but we found out that we were making decisions relatively promptly and they were good decisions. So that's what we didn't understand. But I think the moral of the story is we addressed it and then the scores came up. When we gave people the opportunity to speak, the scores came up.
I think that's the moral of the story, which is sometimes we don't know why they improved. However, humans can be very irrational. We have high degrees of perception. Hey, how do we talk about that and give them a voice and let them know that we care and we're trying? Let me ask you, you mentioned you're an auditory learner. You hear things better. That's how you process. Do you remember at all, like, when that became apparent to you? Because I think this idea as a leader, when you say, oh, this is how I learn best and I know this, therefore I'm observing my team to see how they best digest new information and want to communicate. Do you have any context there?
So it's one of those things that became apparent to me when I read about somebody else having that issue. But if you're trying to tell me a story that I need to follow, you're just going to need to tell it to me. It'll be way quicker for both of us, I promise.
Well, this might be a totally separate conversation to have. I can imagine, though, a byproduct of that is when someone comes and gives you information, when you have to go face to face with somebody and explain it, all of a sudden you have to think, okay, wait a minute. Do I really know this? Do I really believe in it? Do I know the beats of this story? And can I do it concisely? Because no one wants a 12-minute monologue. So I can only imagine when people, when they go through that process of, oh, shoot, I'm going to have to go talk to Adam about this. It forces them to really think through some of those assumptions and some of these things that might have just been breezed over ahead of time.
Yeah. And candidly, it's unfortunate because there is a cultural shift, especially with young people who they're more comfortable sending emails. Talking to people on the phone is a lost skill, especially with younger people, not everybody. People prefer to send emails, and I just need to talk to people. And I make my rounds around the office every morning and I talk to people. And that's when I say, if somebody sent me an email, maybe I'll have a little chat. Not a bad chat, just you need to explain it to me.
So let's talk about shadow behaviors, which are two words independently of each other. I feel very confident understanding. And when you put them together, I didn't really know where that was going. And then you started to explain it. You mentioned this book, Actualized Leadership by Dr. William Sparks, who was a professor of yours in your MBA program. And I had, just when you were talking, let alone when I went through the book, there was a lot of these things that I knew immediately about myself that were not flattering, were shadow behaviors that absolutely put vocabulary to what I'm like when I'm at my worst, which is a feeling, quite frankly, I haven't had before, at least in a while. So maybe give me and the audience, give us an overview of actualized leadership, shadow behaviors, and how that has changed the way you view and live out leadership.
Yeah, so it kind of opened my eyes to what I am, and we're balancing the uncomfortable with what it says, which is the way I feel I am. But it kind of says I impose my will, and when I get frustrated, I get really blind. And then some of my weaknesses are, and I've got to look at this because, fear of betrayal is my leadership shadow, right? And so it tells me, and I can feel it. When I get frustrated, I can feel myself going into this behavior where I'm going to say something, I'm going to become really aggressive with people. And just the fact that I can feel it coming and I know what it is, helps me stop it. So it's been really, really eye-opening for me. But I think there's a little bit of balance I take. I've had teammates of mine say, like, I don't used to really kind of let people have it a little bit. You toned it down, and maybe I'm overconscious about the way it is because maybe sometimes I should be a little more aggressive in that. But like I said, it was really a really valuable course for me. I've taken countless personality assessments that say all kinds of things, but this is definitely the one that I still remember and I use it day to day.
Yeah. So is it fair to say, in general, our leadership behaviors that we portray, oftentimes they're positive when things are going well, yet when we're under stress, when we're under pressure, when things aren't going well, rule number one of leadership is know thyself, right? And these shadow behaviors are your worst tendencies that are somewhat predictable if we're on the hunt to find out how we really are and how we think and act. Is that fair?
That's fair. And I think knowing what they are when you feel the stress, I could feel it. When I get irritated, I can just feel it in the back of my head. And I'm like, all right, tone it down, Adam.
Well, I took the short version of it because I wanted to get some more context for this conversation. And it said two of the bullet points were defensive, and then somewhere there's a couple other words, but the main one was sarcastic. And I get defensive and I get sarcastic. And that's a bad combination. And I work with, and obviously live with my wife, work in the business together. And I feel that coming in, I'm like, you're being defensive. You're about to say something that's going to be a wise ass that you're going to regret in a minute. And then it's just trying to take a deep breath and to dial it back down. But this brief interaction I've had, and I've got through a third of the book, really gave vocabulary, and I think hit me in the face with what I kind of know, but have never really confronted. So I would strongly recommend that. And just this conversation, is any other book or movie or case study or anything else that you covered in your MBA program, anything else really stand out to you in terms of the tools somebody can get? Literally, I ordered this and Amazon delivered the next day. So I'm like, okay, great. Now I have a new tool, has me thinking a little bit differently. Anything come to mind?
So there was a business strategy class that I really enjoyed. It kind of put into context, the theory of selling. I mean, we talked about it a little bit earlier. I am an engineer and I've only taken engineering classes, very few. So just sometimes I understand, how to sell work, but I'm putting the words in the vocabulary and putting together a more concrete plan for me has really helped me a lot. We talk a lot about, things that we should know, how we're going to differentiate ourselves, how we're going to be unique, which is a DPR core value. So that's helped me a lot. So absent doing it was when I was in my mid 40s at 4:00 in the morning, but it's something that I would recommend to everybody too. I thought it was great.
Yeah. I want to ask you, maybe this is kind of a little fun question here to kind of wrap up the conversation. We started with the favorite leadership movie, and we did not talk about this for people that are regular listeners of the podcast. Moneyball is one of my favorite movies. I believe it's my favorite business book because of that. And me and a couple of buddies went over to our local state championship winning 6A Texas baseball team and recorded a Moneyball episode from the dugout and recorded it. So I'll send that to you, but maybe a dovetail there. We're not going to go movies. We'll go music. I'm going to call this my Sheryl Crow question. Do you, Adam, have a favorite mistake? Something you look back on and thought, man, that hurt at the time. I wish it didn't happen. However, the lesson I learned from it is something that I revisit often and ultimately am grateful that it happened. Anything come to mind?
Yeah. So I think my favorite mistake were my engineering degrees, because we kind of had this conversation. So I went to school for engineering, and I started out, and back then everybody did an intern every summer, their college degree. We maybe got one. I'm a little old, I'll date myself. And I interned at a consulting engineering company for the summer, and I left there thinking, oh my gosh. I pulled out my Iowa State University catalog. I started looking at majors, like how fast can I graduate if I change majors? And I just kind of stuck it through. And my dad said, just go get your degrees and figure it out. And it led me to construction. I talked to a person who said, construction companies hire engineers. I said, oh, that's great. I need to go figure that out. And I started out in construction. It was great. And I think the reason I think it's my favorite mistake is I have a lot of, mechanical, electrical, and engineering contacts, which is applicable to construction. And I use it a lot. Obviously I'm not an engineer, and I still love, my favorite projects to build are energy plants. So fun. I like hospitals because there's a lot of MEP type heavy work. And that's the stuff I really enjoy. So, I don't know if it's a mistake, but yeah, it's something that I had a lot of heartburn over it when I was in college, and it really worked out well for me.
Looking back on your engineering pedigree, 2 degrees, both in undergrad, Iowa State, obviously a fantastic school. Whatever work you put into getting to those at Iowa State, engineering really teaches you how to think about a problem and be methodical. But in some cases, we see a lot of engineers get out and they struggle with communication. They struggle with leadership, sales, and marketing. I don't know, maybe any insight there of either some strengths that you didn't imagine you would get despite knowing what you know now, you probably wouldn't have gone into engineering, but also maybe gave you a superpower there.
It's given me the ability to be really analytical, and maybe analytical to a fault. And ironically, it's part of my assertive shadow behavior is I'm just overly analytical, and what's logical to me makes sense. But when you attack a problem and you get a problem, no matter what it is, I just start writing down sort of the problem and the pros and cons, and it helps me just weave my way to a solution. It may not be the solution that you land on, but another thing that I've learned from just understanding all aspects of a problem is if you know what the problem is and you go in a direction, if your solution fails, it still gives you the backup to understand what your other options are if you just talk it through rather than, I'm just going to do this because it feels right at the time. I think just the analytical nature of engineers by attacking problems methodically is the way I attack problems, and that's what helped me.
Yeah, I feel like we all have to, and I think you alluded before with, you just think about the generations we have on the job site and such the wide range, and we have folks who they've never known a world that hasn't really existed without an iPhone. And then you have folks who are really not comfortable and are trying to exit the workforce without ever really trying to really get too involved in technology. And, guys like us are kind of in that middle, a little bit of both. And we have to kind of bridge that gap, which for me, I'm like, that's the challenge. That's just another element of what we have to overcome. And I also think why it's fascinating to work with different people and learn from them. Just curious, have you guys had any success about pairing and kind of almost having these reverse mentorships where you're having some young people, really strong technology, share their insights in any sort of methodical way with folks who really have all the other skills but aren't that comfortable with technology?
We haven't had any mentorships like that. It's actually a great idea. I haven't thought about it. We may, but we offer a ton of training for people within our organization and our projects. And it's just sort of no embarrassment, come learn. It's no big deal. We want you guys to use these tools. And then there's, typically, I'll pick on my superintendents, right? You got some senior superintendents who know everything in the world about construction, but not about technology. Well, we may pair them up with an assistant superintendent who embraces the technology. And the senior, he may never use it. And that's, at this point, I'm just going to say that's okay. But as long as somebody's using it, I'm okay with the way it's going.
Yeah. Sure, you've learned. I've gotten better at this as I've gotten older. I can't fight every battle. You got to pick your spots. And if generally we're going in the right direction, sometimes putting the sword down is the better way to go. Hey, Adam, I appreciate you making time. Again, just from our previous conversation, it has me, this whole idea of shadow behaviors is something that I feel like I'm just scratching the surface on.
Yeah.
And you get these ideas where you're like, this is really important. I don't really know why, but it's something that I need to dig into more. So I appreciate you sharing that. And again, I think just sharing your perspective and making time for this was very helpful to me. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate it.
All right then, friend, how did that go? Hopefully you enjoyed my conversation with Mr. Adam Kouri at DPR. If you did, please do two things. Number one, share this with your network. Your network looks to people like you to try to figure out where they should invest their limited time and attention. And if you'd be willing to make a referral, a recommendation to listen to this episode, that would mean a lot to us as we strive to grow our construction audience to bring us all closer together. And if I can ask for one more thing, rate and review us on whatever podcast platform you are listening to. That means more to us than you know. All right, friends, that's all we got. We're going to close out with our leadership mantra. You, my friend, are owed nothing. Deliver value first. Make it a great week.